Thinking Out Loud with Dave Palmer. Here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey. And yes, St. Thomas Aquinas had some interesting insights on why we have a pope, especially with the world really focused on the papacy. I think now is a great time for us Catholics to share these truths. And to help us do that, we've got Dave Palmer here. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Keith. Good to be with you again this morning.
Likewise. Yes. Good morning.
Yeah, I first of all want to thank you guys, Morning Joy, because it was through this show yesterday morning that I found out about the passing of Pope Francis. The first thing I did in the morning was I checked my email and I saw there was an email from Tim that indicated that the Holy Father had passed away. So I immediately turned on Morning Joy, and I found y'all's commentary to be very good and very balanced and soothing. And so thank you, first of all, for that. And yeah, as you mentioned, there aren't that many times in the news cycle when the papacy is on the front page of every news and every website, and everybody is talking about it. And it's not just right now; it's going to be for a while now, because there's going to be the funeral probably within the next week or so, and then you're going to have the conclave, and the whole world, as Debbie and Adam were talking about, are interested in Catholicism. And so during this interregnum period, I think this is a really, really good opportunity for us to learn some of the classic teachings about why we have a pope in the first place, and why not go to St. Thomas Aquinas. And I decided to do this rather than talk about Easter, which we'll do next week. But interestingly, in the Summa Theologia, which I always focus on in these segments, Thomas didn't say a lot about this topic, about why we have a pope. He talked about ministers and the priesthood, and but as far as that, he was a little bit silent. But as if writing one Summa wasn't enough, St. Thomas Aquinas wrote two Summas. there's a whole other Summa called the Summa Contra Gentiles, and in that one, it has more of an apologetics nature. And so in that one, he wrote about whether the papacy was divinely instituted by Christ. Okay, so that's what I want to talk about. And he lays it out very clearly and very concisely, as you would imagine. And in the Summa Contra Gentiles, he makes four arguments for why we need a pope, why there should be one man at the top of the hierarchy in leading the body of all Christians in the world. And then he has a couple of what he calls objections that he gets into also. So as time allows, I'll get through these. And I just will want to say that in this interregnum time, when people are already talking about Catholicism, I think there's really three things that I can think of, maybe y'all can think of different ones, that really make Catholicism unique, even among other Christian bodies. And one of them, of course, is the Eucharist. One of them, I believe, is our devotion to the Blessed Mother. And I think the third one you'd have to say would be authority. That what makes us different, what makes us unique. And I think you have to point to the papacy. So if we can convince people that the papacy makes sense, I think we've gone a long way in convincing them to move the needle a little bit to consider Catholicism. So, all right. So 4 arguments real quickly of why there should be one person at the top of the hierarchy. Thomas says, first of all, we have local bishops, we have local leaders. Even in Protestant communities, typically there will be some kind of an elder or a bishop or somebody leading a local community. So he says, if you have all these local leaders and you have the worldwide church, doesn't it make sense to have one person that's overseeing all of the local bishops, right? Because if you have all these bishops just kind of doing their own thing, well, what you have ultimately is Protestantism, right? I mean, that's what's happened, is everybody gets split off. And so if you have one man at the top, you're going to have a lot more order within all of the mid-level leaders, I guess you could say. So that's the first one. And then he says, having a pope, having one person in charge is the best way to authoritatively resolve disputes about the faith for all Christians. And he quotes Ephesians 4, where St. Paul talks about one faith, one God, one baptism. there's a need that we have for unity. There's a need that we have for everybody kind of following the same line. And of course, in Aquinas' time, there were no Protestants, but there had already been the division between the Orthodox and the Roman Catholics, and so there was already, you're beginning to see some of the signs of division even in the 13th century. So that's the second argument. The third one is one leader best instills peace when it comes to unity by one rather than others. And I know that I sometimes, when I used to teach high school, I would give an example and say, okay, to the students, there's 20, 25 kids in front of me, and if I left for an hour and I pointed 4 people to be in charge of the class while I'm gone, as opposed to appointing one who ultimately has the decision to keep things under control, I said, which one would be more chaotic? Yeah, if you had 4 people in charge, or if you had one, one ultimately is going to be the one that tells me how things went. And they all agree, well, it always makes sense to have one person at the top. And then finally, the fourth argument, the church on earth is an imitation of the church in heaven, which has one head. So Christ, the King, is ruling in heaven. After, of course, he left earth, he's ruling in heaven. Earth is an imitation of heaven, so we should do as they do in heaven. And so we're going to have one ruler down here, one ruler up there, and that's the best way so that we can kind of model what's going on already in heaven. So those are his 4 arguments. I'll pause for the 2 objections that he answers, but those are what do you are those convincing to you, Keith?
I'm convinced, but then again, I'm a Catholic, so I guess I can't be too off the mark there. It's interesting because I think us Americans, we tend to view things politically like it's like a democracy, where it's like, well, the papacy is not a democracy, and so sometimes I think we can kind of get that confused. But this is very interesting, and if I wasn't Catholic, I would be very persuaded.
Yeah, I mean, we had an election last November every 4 years for the president. We don't elect 2 people, Right. I mean, we elect a president and a vice president, but even within that, there's a real hierarchy. Could you imagine if we said, okay, there's going to be a Democratic president and a Republican president, and then we're just going to kind of see if you guys can work it out? I mean, that would be so chaotic. I mean, we know, especially in the climate that we have today. That's why we just know it makes sense you elect one person. But Aquinas also would not have said that person has just absolute authority. There's always going to be people consulting, and of course he has the College of Cardinals, which we're going to find out a lot about in these coming weeks as well. So let me see. I have a little bit of time. I'll tell you the 2 objections. One of the objections he answers is, which is kind of answered already, but he says that people will say, well, we don't need a chief shepherd. We have Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ is the ruler of the church, even though he's already ascended into heaven. And so why do you need somebody else? Well, the obvious answer is, well, he's not, physically present. He's not bodily present with us. And so we still need somebody to succeed him. And the scriptural evidence that he uses is that when Jesus said to Peter, feed my sheep. And so Jesus very clearly in scripture appointed a leader. You're Peter, and upon this rock I'll build my church. So it's pretty clear that when Jesus was leaving, he was going to appoint somebody else. And then the second argument would be, if Peter was the first pope, well, there's no indication that there would be successors, right? Why would we continue to have one pope after the next, after the next, after the next? And Aquinas quotes Matthew 28:20, where he says, I am with you always until the close of the age. Okay, so Jesus never departs from us. He left himself, sacramentally, but as far as bodily presence, he was wise as a good ruler to leave a physical, human, alive person behind to lead his church until he comes again. So I think it makes sense. And I think if during this time around the water cooler, as people are, talking about this naturally in the office, and at the grocery store or what else. I think it's nice to have a few of these quivers, bows in our quiver, so to speak, as far as something that we can quickly say if somebody were to ask, in the elevator, and you got 30 seconds to explain why we have a pope. A couple of those may be good things to say.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's definitely going to be helpful for many out there. Just knowing when I worked in corporate America, there would every once in a while, there'd be these moments that were like, hey, this is my quote unquote time to shine as a Catholic. Like, I better step up and mention, like, no, this is actually what we believe in. So that's very helpful, Dave. Anything for Back to the Father this Friday at 1 p.m. Central on GRN Online YouTube? What do we got going on there?
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard not to mention a little bit about this kind of information about the papacy, and as we continue to talk about the passing of Pope Francis and the plans for his funeral, because probably by Friday it's going to be right around the corner. But I'm going to continue my series on the Eucharist, because I'm so convinced that obviously the source and summit of the Christian faith, when that's the Eucharist, that's pretty important. But I love digging in and really having a good foundation, even beyond faith. I mean, we believe in the Eucharist is really Jesus by faith, and that's key. But if we have a little bit of a greater understanding of it, and Thomas spent so much time in the Summa on it, so we're going to continue those teachings and that discussion.
Awesome. Well, certainly looking forward to that. And that is, once again, Back to the Father. It's every single Friday at 1 p.m. Central, and you can just search on GRN Online. That'll pull up. There's a whole playlist of episodes of Back to the Father. So if you need to catch up on all things Summa and St. Thomas Aquinas, that's a great spot to start off with. But thanks again, Dave, for joining us. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the first hour of Morning Joy, where truth matters. Make sure to tune in tomorrow on Morning Joy. Sissel Anderson will be on her Fruitful Living segment. But hey, for those unable to stick around for the second hour of Morning Joy, we'll see you bright and early, 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern. But hey, now for very exciting. This is very exciting for those listening on Catholic Spirit Radio. Don't go anywhere, okay? The very first day / hour of the Carathon is happening right now, so stay tuned for that. For those hanging with us on Morning Joy, we're going to be joined by author and speaker Ed Van Buskirk. We'll be talking about the 10 Commandments and why they're so important for us, especially today. So stay tuned. But for those that are going to be leaving, hey, God bless and make it a joyful day. We'll see you tomorrow.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.